I should say that I've been sort of waiting and watching Olympic climbing for a really long time, probably longer than a lot of people even thought of it. I actually went to the Olympics in 2006 in Torino, Italy. They had a climbing exhibition, and it was the very first time that climbing had any connection to the Olympics at all. So that's sort of my history with it. And so I've watched this evolution for, almost 20 years at this point.
Hello and welcome to the Duffel Shuffle. I'm Adrian Ballinger, and we're here to discuss the world of climbing and skiing in all its forms through the eyes of mountain guides.
And I'm Sam Kiekefer. In each episode, we'll unpack exhilarating stories, share invaluable insights, and get up close and personal with some of the most experienced and passionate guides and athletes in the industry.
Whether you're a seasoned alpinist or a weekend warrior, the Duffel Shuffle is your ticket to the thrilling world of climbing, skiing, and mountaineering. Join us.
All right, welcome back to episode 9 of the Duffel Shuffle, our Olympic special. Adrian, how's it going?
We're such Olympic experts. It's going great. It's August 11th as we're recording this news. So the Olympics is officially over.
Yep, it's an interesting time. The Olympics is always something that I feel like people look forward to watching, the opening ceremonies, the main events. I unfortunately did not watch much Olympics this year. I think having a almost 1-year-old kind of changed that dynamic for me. How much did you get in?
Well, and also, you're also in Ecuador right now, aren't you? Look at that artwork behind you.
Yeah, we've got a nice painting behind me in the hotel room in Quito. But I just got into Ecuador last night, so I don't have much of an excuse as to why I didn't watch more Olympics.
I watched some Olympics. Our guest today, Emily Harrington, my wife and professional rock climber, is a complete obsessive. She loves all things sport, truly, but loves the Olympics. So she was watching gymnastics and she was watching track, and I don't think she was watching shooting, but it popped up at everyone's social media feeds. And then, of course, like all things climbing. I heard a lot, and then I watched some parts of the Olympics when I was able to hang out and not working or training or whatever it is I do at home in the summer in Tahoe. But I think it's been a great Olympics. I thought the opening ceremony, while being completely boring, was totally French unique, or boring to me, I should say, but it was also so unique. And I think Peacock, NBC's streaming service, got their act together in such a way that anyone could watch any sport any time of the day. And that truly wasn't true in Tokyo a couple of years ago when the streaming service was launched. And so what I noticed was so many of my friends actually tuning into the sports they cared about and wanting to talk about it. So I think it was a real win for the Olympics, for NBC, and I hope for the athletes.
Well, I'll share my fun Olympic factoid that I think is the coolest thing I learned from this past 2 weeks. In 1924, the men's 100-yard dash time was 10.6 seconds. And this year, 100 years later, it was 9.7 seconds. So less than a second of difference in over 100 years, with tracks changing and shoes and nutrition, hydration, all the factors. They've only been able to take off under a second.
Wow.
It's not very impressive.
That must be the 100 meters, not the 100 yards, right?
Guess 100 meters, yes.
Let's say 100 meters, since, it must be a world event. So they probably do meters, not yards. But
fair.
That is amazing. At the same
Isn't that
time,
wild?
I guess it's 10% faster.
Okay, true.
So that's interesting. I mean, but people have been running for millennia. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. People have been running for millennia and running really fast, and they've been able to cut off 10%.
Yeah, less than a second.
I have read less than a second. I have read that we are getting scientists believe we are getting to like the limit of human, how much faster running can be done. Like there's actually a limitation to running on 2 feet. And I think this might have come out in like the Netflix series Sprint, which I watched with Emily, which is about the 100-meter sprint. But it caused us to go down a rabbit hole. I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast yet, that some people believe the only way humans will run faster than whatever the fastest human possible speed is on 2 feet is for humans to run on 4 appendages instead of 2, that is the only way to go faster. And so there's now like actual leagues in competition, and the 4-footed 100-meter dash has reduced in speed many seconds. So maybe you should watch that. They've gone from, let's say, 30
Wow.
seconds to less than 20 seconds in less than a decade. And they're figuring out, they think the way that they will eventually beat whatever it is, 9.5 seconds or something like
No
that,
chance.
will be on 4.
No chance. But the world record for speed climbing was broken in these Olympics,
Yeah,
going
maybe we
15
should
meters vertically on 4.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Me speaking as an expert on any Olympic sport is a bad idea, but is, even climbing my total passion, because, the competitive climbing is obviously not what we focus on, but me talking about the 100-meter dash is even more ridiculous. So yeah, let's dial in. As you said, the speed climbing, I think, was a real win at the Olympics this year. I'm sure most of our listeners know that there were 2 different medals within the climbing. We'll talk a lot more about that with Emily Harrington in a bit. But I guess the news since we recorded with Emily is that the finals are done. And world record was set. The wild thing was it was set by an athlete who did not win. It was an American named Sam Watson, and he set the new world record for speed climbing in his like what they call the small final, to figure out who's third and fourth place. So he got a bronze medal, but also set the fastest time ever.
But I guess that can happen in track and field too. If you're in the, semifinal heat and you set a world record, and then you're slightly slower in the finals. So
It's a great
not that much of an anomaly, but still pretty wild that the world record was set by the third place medalist.
Yep.
But congratulations to Sam Watson. That's a big deal.
And I think we will continue to see those times go down. Emily and I, it is in many ways, it's a new sport. I think it's 20 or so years old, speed climbing. And so techniques and beta and all these things that Em will speak a little more to, but it seems like we'll keep going faster. The women's speed climbing was also fantastic. I think Alexandra won gold. And it's just worth seeing how wildly different it looks than any form of climbing that I've attempted to do. So recommend people checking out on Peacock some of the speed climbing.
Climbing Gold has a great podcast on speed climbing, the origins, etc. as well. So lots of kind of interesting content. And I think it just highlights the growth in the sport as a whole. In 2020, it was all 3 competitions were 1 medal on the men's and women's side. Now we had 2 medals in the speed event, and then the lead and bouldering combination of sport climbing. And hopefully in 2028, we'll see 3 medals on each side of the gender split, just kind of showing the growth of climbing and the place that it has established in the Olympic Games.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I think the big thing we can say as armchair Olympic climber people, like, such a great win for climbing. I think the speed climbing was incredible to watch, really easy for people to understand, and a world record was set, which is notable and meaningful. And Em always talks about it being the fastest Olympic sport. I mean, it is. The records are under 5 seconds for the men and around 6 seconds for the women. It's incredible. And then the combined format for bouldering and lead this year, differentiated from Tokyo, where all 3 were together. We really got to see the boulders, lead climbers, which for me, as a kind of like old school climber, like, those forms of climbing really fit what I understand and maybe appreciate the most. And we saw just incredible performances in both the men's and the women's, from the worldwide athletes and from the American athletes. I mean, one thing I think worth mentioning now that it's finished is kind of the rise of the American team in general. Obviously, Brooke as an American getting silver for the women.
Colin Duffy just missed out on the men's side.
Colin Duffy
in
just
fourth.
missing. That's right. And the American team is now so deep and so strong across both leading in bouldering and speed climbing, and it's just so exciting. And there's no way that doesn't increase the energy that are in climbing gyms today, that are in youth climbing teams. And I'm excited to see how climbing changes as more energy is found to encourage people. More energy is there to encourage people to get into climbing, to encourage kids to get into climbing, and then to recognize talent. Like, we have such mind-blowingly talented climbers today, but imagine what it's going to look like a decade from now when the pool of potential groundbreaking climbers is so much larger. And hopefully funding increases because of things like Olympics and real sponsorships becoming more truly possible for gym climbers, as well as kind of like outdoor adventurers. The future of the sport is bright.
Yes, clearly there were still some obvious favorites to win, but there were fewer favorites than I remember in 2021. And I think that just speaks to, like you're saying, the growth of the sport and the kind of the competitive nature that is being established in that sport as it continues to develop and become a staple, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, Yanya, of course, on the women's side, winning gold. Everyone expected it. Everyone knew it would happen. It would have been a surprise if it hadn't happened. She is, as I understand it, the GOAT of women's competition climbing. And she crushed, despite all this new talent coming up and really showing themselves to be quite strong. In the men's, the field was certainly more spread, and Toby Roberts winning gold. One of the youth, I think we'd count him as, but then Jakob Schubert, getting bronze, is someone who's been on the circuit for so long, is one of the world's best outdoor climbers as well. So he doesn't focus just on competition climbing. And so it's really fun to see like some of the like deeply more experienced, maybe older climbers really perform, and some of the young talent coming up. Yeah, great fun to watch. I guess if there is
Awesome.
anyone that I was like sad to see, and this is personal, we all have our personal favorites. Adam Andra, I think most of us look at, certainly I do, as just the best climber in the world on all stages. And, had he been able to add an Olympic medal to that best climber on the planet, across all disciplines, I think it would have been really, really meaningful. I don't think it takes anything away. He gave amazing performances. He ended up 6th. I hope he's really proud of his Olympic time as well as everything else he does. And I'm excited. I'm guessing he does not continue like training for LA. And if that's true, yeah, I'm excited to see what he does when he puts all his energy into the outdoor side of our sport.
Absolutely. Well, it was really fun having Emily on. We have a great interview coming up next. She's got a wealth of knowledge as far as competition climbing goes. So our resident expert.
Absolutely. Looking forward to hearing her thoughts.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Have fun in Ecuador, Sam. Today's podcast is brought to you by Alpenglow Expeditions, a Tahoe-based guide company with an international reputation. In its 20th year of operations, Alpenglow leads the highest quality expeditions in some of the world's greatest mountain ranges, from California's High Sierra to the rugged Himalaya. Alpenglow runs more than 40 international expeditions per year, as well as offering a full menu of guided ski and climbing courses throughout California. Join us and experience the Alpenglow difference. Welcome back to the Duffel Shuffle podcast and our special Olympics episode. We're going to see how this goes. Today we have joining us Emily Harrington. Hi, Emily.
Hi.
Emily
How's it
is
going?
all of 20 feet away from me, but in a separate room because we're still neophyte podcasters and can't handle having our guest in the same room. To all the listeners, Emily Harrington, as you might know, is my wife, a professional rock climber sponsored by the North Face, along with another number of other companies. And while she is perhaps today best known for her Yosemite and Big Wall and all mountain antics as a professional climber, she comes from a comp background. So when Sam and I were trying to figure out what the heck all this Olympic climbing hype is about, we thought Em would be the first person we'd want to chat with. So welcome, Em.
Thank you. I'm excited
She's also
to be
the
here
only
again.
2-time Duffel Shuffle guest.
Ooh.
And if this episode goes well, she might be a 3-time. We'll bring her back on because we should say we're recording on Wednesday, August 7th. So we're in the middle of week 2 of the Olympics, which is also halfway through the climbing portion of the Olympics. So if this goes well and we have fun and people listen to it, we might do another recording after the Olympics are wrapped to talk about what actually happened.
So Emily, we refer to you as our resident expert. You refer to yourself as just a super fan. So as a super fan, start off, where are the Olympics watched? How often are you getting up in the middle of the night to watch them because they're halfway across the world? What's kind of the beta there?
Well, the beta for watching the Olympics is actually quite a bit easier than it's been in past Olympics, thankfully. If you download Peacock or just get like a subscription to Peacock, you can basically watch any event, replays. It's super easy, user friendly, and it's been a great way to watch the Olympics, all the sports. I watch all the sports.
You're an Olympic fan,
I am
as
a
many,
fan.
many people are.
I'm a sports fan. I love sports and elite athleticism.
Yeah, I basically haven't seen my wife for the last 10 days. And it is true. I'm like, hey, how about we watch this like Oscar winning film? And she's like, how about we watch another Netflix sports documentary about another sport that we know nothing about? We just watched Sprint, which also, I got to be honest,
a sports fan. Yeah.
It made watching track and field in the Olympics so much more fun to actually have these little insights into the actual athletes' lives. So I am also a fan of all the sports shows. But
well, that's kind of why we're doing this, right? Like getting Emily's insights into the Olympics and sport climbing in the Olympics is it adds value to what you're watching when you're watching a sport that you may be somewhat familiar with or not at all.
Exactly. Yep.
What's your impression of the second go at adding climbing to the Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, I should say that I've been sort of waiting and watching Olympic climbing for a really long time, probably longer than a lot of people even thought of it. I actually went to the Olympics in 2006 in Torino, Italy,
which is the Winter Olympics.
It's the Winter Olympics. It was random, but they had a climbing like exhibition, and it was the very first time that climbing had any like connection to the Olympics at all, and I was there. So that's sort of my history with it, because I was really into competition climbing and I was a top like American competitor on the World Cup circuit then. And so I've watched this evolution for, almost 20 years at this point. And for me, it's really exciting to see climbing in the Olympics. It's really exciting to see this format and the way it's expanded and transitioned from the Tokyo format when speed, bouldering, and lead were all combined into under one medal. Now speed's been separated out into its own medal, and you have bouldering and lead together, which are much more closely related as a sport. And so you essentially have two medals, which is exciting. It also showcases speed climbing in a new way to the world. You have the best, fastest speed climbers now on the Olympic stage, which is really fun to watch. I'm also a fan of competition speed climbing. And yeah, I've been I've been really excited about it for a long time now, and it's been super fun to watch.
And I know a lot of the bouldering and lead climbers that are in the Olympics are also really strong, well-known outdoor climbers, the sport climbers, track climbers, some of the best in the world. Is that also true of the speed climbers? Do their skill sets tend to transition to outdoors and other forms of climbing as well?
I don't think I'm not an expert on speed climbing, but I don't think it transitions as well. I think it's a little bit more removed from the outdoor aspect. I do know that a lot of the speed climbers, especially the Americans, also enjoy lead climbing, outdoor climbing, bouldering. But I don't know if all of them do, especially the speed specialists from countries like Indonesia. I'm not totally sure of that. I did just listen to the Climbing Gold podcast about the origins of competition speed climbing, and it's super interesting. And it was just an interesting trajectory for that sport, and it sort of, I feel like, is a little bit more like the 100-meter dash in track and field. It's a
Mhm.
standardized route. It's very fast. You can kind of just train that, and that can be the only thing you do, and you can get really, really good at it. Whereas bouldering and lead, it's quite a bit different. It's quite a bit more complicated, and it's quite a bit more linked back to outdoor rock climbing, I think.
And we know, and you mentioned that speed, lead, and bouldering were all combined in Tokyo, and now they're separated out. Out of interest, is there any athlete doing both, and would that even be allowed? Kind of like doing the 100 and the 200, or is it more different than that? Would it be like doing the 100 and the javelin? Like it just doesn't happen.
It's not happening. No, I think they're just too different. They're two different sports at this point, and so I think it's allowed. But there's nobody doing it, as far as I know. The boulders and the lead climbers who were forced to do speed climbing at the Olympics in Tokyo never set foot on a speed route again after the Olympics in Tokyo. um, and yeah, so I don't think there is any. I think in LA, if there's three different medals, if there's speed, bouldering, and lead, which it sounds like there might be, I think you might have athletes doing both bouldering and lead, maybe.
Okay.
But as far as speed, it's just too different.
So you mentioned in Tokyo they had two medals, one for men, one for women.
Mm-hmm.
Here in Paris, there's now four medals, two for
Yes,
speed, man and woman, two for
bouldering and lead. Yep.
bouldering lead, and it might go up to six medals in LA. Is this a sign of climbing's popularity or competition climbing's popularity in the Olympics? Like, is this a great trajectory?
I sure hope so. Yeah, I'm not totally sure how the sports the new sports that are chosen get to stay in the Olympics. I think they have to kind of re-qualify for the Olympics every time. And I do know that climbing has already been accepted into LA, but I think it's not a sure bet that it's going to make it every year. But I think that it's a good sign that they're kind of expanding it and allowing for more medals. So I'm sure, I feel like it's doing well. I've heard from friends who are there that it's been received really well, and that the 6,000 person stadium is always full, and there's a lot of enthusiasm, and it's all very exciting, and there's a lot of buzz around it.
Oh, that's
So
great.
real quick, let's dive into kind of what each discipline looks like. Starting off with speed climbing, because I think that's like the most interesting one to me because it's so different than what I'm used to. Speed climbing. Do you know how tall the wall is, Emily?
Yeah, it's 15 meters tall, and I think there's something like 20 holds and 11-foot holds. All the handholds are the same. They're just kind of oriented differently. The route is the same as it's always been since, I think, 2006. So it's a standardized route. The wall is 5 degrees overhanging, and it's two routes side by side. And climbers, basically, there's like a seeding round where they race for time, and then they get put into a qualification knockout round where like the last place person goes against the first place person, and whoever wins that race goes on to the final. And so it's knockout until then, and then the finals is just, again, eighth place versus first place, and then it goes from quarterfinal to semifinal, and then to a big final and a small final. Big final being for gold and silver, and then small final being for that bronze place.
And so it's a head-to-head race, but time is also super important because there's world records on the line. What do you know what the men's and women's world records are roughly right now?
I do. The men's world record, and it's cool because it's such a new sport, and this year at the Olympics, the world record and the Olympic record just kept getting broken, like in the qualifier even. And it would like every round, it would just get broken and broken and broken because everyone's gotten so good in the last few years. So the men's world record is now 4.75, and that was just broken yesterday.
Seconds.
Yes.
4.75 seconds.
Yeah.
It's the fastest Olympic sport. An American, this 18-year-old kid named Sam Watson, I believe he's from Texas. He actually broke his own record that he had set previously this year. And yeah, it was super exciting to see. He's now in the final, which is happening tomorrow. And so most of the best men are going sub 5 seconds now. And then for the women, a Polish woman, Alexandra Miroslaw, just won the gold today, actually. And she also broke her own world record. And I believe that record is 6.06 seconds. I think we'll see the women breaking 6 seconds soon.
Adrian, have you ever speed climbed before?
I have absolutely never speed climbed before, at least on this wall. And while, that makes me a little bit sad, let's be clear. Emily Harrington has also never climbed this wall. Is that true?
Yeah, it's true.
I think we need to get one set at the local gym and just see what the times are.
There's one
Because I think I could probably do it in
I was
20.
like, I want to race Emily Harrington. And I was like, no, I really don't want to race Emily Harrington.
The climb, I keep referring back to the Climbing Gold podcast. It's so interesting. It was the route was set by this super legendary French climber, now like route setter, legendary. His name's Jackie Godoff, and he set the route back in 2006 as like, I think this is similar to like the 100 meter, and I think climbers will someday be able to do it in like 10 seconds.
Wow!
But
and now it's under 5.
Yeah.
And you mentioning Climbing Gold is a feature, not a bug. For listeners, Climbing Gold is a podcast you may or may not be familiar with Fitz Cahal and Alex Honnold and guests. And, we're going to do 30 minutes on the Olympics right now. Climbing Gold is doing a full season, I think, 6 or 8 podcasts. So if you want to learn more about all these sports, all the competitors, so much deeper dive, that's the place. And me and Emily and Sam, we all listen to it and love it. So check out Climbing Gold.
Absolutely. So speed climbing, just wild to watch. Fastest Olympic sport. Talk a little bit about lead and boulder as a kind of combined event and how that works in the Olympics, Emily.
Yeah, so lead climbing and bouldering are the two other disciplines. They're more closely related to outdoor climbing and the roots of outdoor climbing, I would say. Lead climbing being a single route with holds set on a wall, generally like 15 to 20 meters high. I think this one might be like 16 meters, and with varying angles, mostly overhanging though. And there's a route set. Climbers have one chance to climb up the wall, get as far as they can, and then when you fall, you're done. One try. Each hold is worth a number of points, and in the Olympics, the Olympic format, actually, as you progress higher, each hold is worth more points. So at the bottom, I think each hold is worth 1 point, and then one section, each hold is worth 2 points, and then 3 points, and then 4 points, for a total of 100 points, actually. So that's lead climbing, and it's very high pressure because you only get one try. So if you mess up and you fall, then you're done. Whereas bouldering is no ropes. The wall, I think, is only like 5 meters tall, and there are problems. So movements, routes set that are very short, and they're very difficult. So you can kind of compare that to like sprinting versus long distance, or like kind of powerlifting versus doing more reps of something. The movements are meant to be really challenging and individually difficult. And there's 4 different problems set, so 4 different challenges. Each in the Olympic format, actually, each problem has to have like a certain characteristic. So there's one really technical problem. There's one problem that's coordination, so it's more parkour. So there's a lot of jumping and there's a lot of things that are really similar to parkour versus like outdoor climbing. And then there's a problem that's called electric, which I'm not really sure what that means, but it's like a combination between jumping and power and strength. And then there's a very physical problem that's just like all about power and strength. So there's 4 boulder problems. Each problem is worth 25 points, and each climber gets 4 minutes to try each problem. So they come out one at a time and they try problem 1 for 4 minutes, and then they go back and the next person comes out, and then they kind of progress like that. And each problem is broken up into 2 different sections or 3 different sections. So if you get to this specific designated hold, it's worth 5 points. If you get a little bit higher, there's another designated hold that's worth 10 points. And then if you complete the problem, it's worth 25 points. And so you have 4 minutes on each of the 4 problems to try to get as many points as you can. And if you do all of them, you get 100 points, just like the lead route. And then at the end, they combine the scores from the lead route and the 4 boulder problems. Whoever has the most points wins.
And I don't think I realized that. So you mentioned, are there always those 4 different styles of bouldering problems? There's always a slab, there's always a power, there's always a jump, that kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah, I think that is a recent development because of the Olympics. They want to test all the different categories and they want to make sure they hit on all of them. And so also I think it helps climbers know what to train for and how to train, knowing that they're going to have to perform on each characteristic.
And do you see pretty dramatic differences between climbers, like climbers who are best at slabs or best at more parkour style? Like, do you really know going in, or is everyone really just becoming similar?
I mean, they're all very good, but there are definitely climbers who are like slab specialists and people who they say like, oh, this person really loves slabs. They're super comfortable on slabs. And then there's other climbers that are incredibly good at coordination and jumping. And there are climbers who are pretty weak at coordination and jumping. And so, yeah, people do specialize. Obviously, if you're in the Olympics, you're really good at all of them. But people definitely have their strengths and weaknesses, obviously.
So lead and bouldering are essentially what you find when you go into a rock gym around the world. That's the 2 disciplines. When you go into a rock gym around the world, most of the boulder problems start at V0 and you might see a V12, a V13 maybe. But typically we don't see much higher than that. And then on the sport climbing side, we'll see, a 5.5 and a 5.6 and up to maybe a 5.12, 5.13. Do you know what the grade is for these Olympic problems, like as it compares to what you would see in the typical gym around the US or around the world?
I've actually heard a lot of discussions about this, and I've heard some interesting things. First of all, route setters get really annoyed when they ask what the grades are of a boulder problem because they say that it's just really hard to grade competition boulder problems because a person only has 4 minutes to do it, to complete it. And so they're saying they're not the hardest boulder problems in the world by a long shot. In a lot of ways, they're just very tricky and hard to figure out. And that's the point. But they are definitely not the hardest. Like, I think I've heard anywhere from like V7 to V10. But the fact that you only have 4 minutes is what makes all the difference. Like, a lot of people could maybe work on a boulder problem, like an Olympic boulder problem, for 3 hours and maybe figure it out and do it. But the fact that you only have 4 minutes is what matters. And then for the routes, I think it's a little bit more translatable, and I'm sure they're like top end 5.14.
Wow.
And so that's really interesting to me, what you just mentioned about the bouldering difficulty, and that so much of it is about figuring it out in 4 minutes. So does that mean, and how do you think that fits within the sport? Does that mean it's leaning much more on kind of like the mental, like problem solving side of climbing versus the power and athleticism side of climbing, or the sport? Like, how does that fit? That's like the 100-meter dash is more purely physical, right? Like, whereas there might be another sport like basketball that is much more strategic. Are you saying that climbing is kind of leaning into that strategic mental side?
I do think that it leans into that strategic mental side, because then you also have speed that is just purely like speed and going really
Right.
fast. And I think, competition boulders are, to a person who doesn't have experience with them, you can look at them and just be completely perplexed. Like, I have no idea
I'm in
what
that category.
is going on. And then you watch these climbers come out and you watch how they solve it, and it is really, really impressive. And then the cool thing that I like to watch is how different people solve the problems completely differently. Like, you might look at something and be like, "Oh, that's how you do it." And then the next person will come out and they'll just do it completely differently and have this really creative solution. And I really enjoy that about especially the bouldering, because I do think that it leans into that creative side and that cerebral side of climbing.
Well, let's talk then about that. That kind of leads into how route setting or route setting is done for bouldering and lead. You mentioned speed is always the same, exactly the same. So there is no route setting there. It's already created. But when you look at bouldering and lead, that means every time they have a competition, right? Those routes are all completely different. How is route setting done, to your understanding? What goes into it, and is it controversial?
I think it's the most stressful job in climbing, honestly, because there is an enormous amount of pressure on the route setters to get it right. And in the weeks before the event, they, first of all, becoming like an Olympic route setter is a huge process. There's a lot of certification, there's a lot of training. You have to have a ton of experience in order to get to that place in the beginning. And then you also have to be a very well-rounded climber. A lot of the route setters are really, really good, accomplished climbers as well, because you have to understand movement so well and you have to understand the level of the athletes. And so in the weeks before, I mean, I'm not totally sure how they do it, but I know in the weeks before they are setting the problems, testing the problems endlessly, kind of trying to anticipate how strong the field is, what their level is going to be on that day. They have to think about things like weather, what the conditions might be like if it's going to be hotter, if it's going to be colder, that can change around entirely. And then they really have to nail the spread of how difficult the routes and the boulders are. Like, you don't want all the athletes doing all the boulder problems and getting to the top of the lead route, but you also don't want all the athletes getting completely shut down, because that doesn't work to spread the field either. And I think nailing it can be really, really tough. And so, yes, it's controversial, but I think at this point people recognize that it's such a hard job and it is hard to nail it. And I think in the past, like, I've watched a lot of World Cups now at this point, and I've watched the Olympics, and I think for the most part they do a really, really good job.
And is the same route setter setting for all of the Olympics for the same team, or does one person get the first round and then the next person gets the quarterfinals and so on and so forth?
No, I believe it's the same team for the whole event, and I think that they've just also so that they can watch the first, say that they watch the first round and they realize that maybe the boulder problems are a little bit too hard, then they can kind of like understand what to do for the next round based on how strong or weak the field is.
So interestingly, I saw the men's, I believe it was the men's quarterfinals. They're talking about it being set too hard because only 4 men finished one problem and only 1 male finished 2 of the 4 problems. So a really, really low, completion rate that probably doesn't, as you mentioned, spread the field out very much as they move forward.
Yeah, the men's boulders in the semifinal were, they use the word overcooked and undercooked a lot, but they were overcooked. So it didn't allow for a lot of tops, and it was even hard to get like the 10-point zones. And so yeah, that made for kind of a slow semifinal as well. Like, it was kind of a little bit boring because you
Right,
didn't
the
have the
climbers are on the
excitement of people.
mats a lot more.
Yeah, they're just like sitting down a lot and falling a lot.
Right.
So I think they were a little bit overcooked. The women's was, I thought, excellent, really well done. I think kind of the ideal is you want like each problem to get topped a few times, hopefully by like different people, and to have excitement. But you also don't want everyone to be topping like one problem, if that makes sense. Like, you want them to be hard enough that only a few people are getting to the top of each one, but you want them all to get done.
I wonder if this was difficult for, let's say, the IOC, to understand and accept climbing. Do you guys know, are there examples of other sports in the Olympics where like the sport is, and the success of the sport is so dependent on course setting, something that changes every single competition?
Well, interestingly, in alpine ski racing, I'm not sure about in the Olympics, but on the World Cup circuit, there's a country that sets each course, or a representative from a country. And so often they can set, little nuances that their athletes might be better at. And I think it's really minor. I don't think on a macro scale, there's still restrictions of what the course must look like, and the spacing of the gates, and the, patterns and such. But different setters, at least on the World Cup, can set that ski course to the favor of their own athletes. But at the same time, other countries' coaches know, what those strategies might be. And so then they can just coach to that as well. So, and there's, inspection periods for that sport. So yeah, it is interesting that the change of the event is so, impactful on the end result.
Yeah. And it does, like, there can be rounds where like the boulder problems just might not suit a certain athlete, and they'll just have a tough time because for some reason they just weren't clicking with any of the boulder problems, or the lead route, or whatever that may be. And the opposite can happen. Like, someone can just have boulder problems that really suit them for some reason. And so it is interesting. It's really hard to kind of predict the outcome in a lot of ways, because you don't know what the route setters are going to do. And so you don't really know who's going to have the best day.
Well, perfect. So this episode is going to come out after the Olympic finals are over. Emily, what are your predictions for the men's and women's, events on the bouldering and lead side?
Well, and before you dive into predictions, can you give us a little update as to like the action of the past 3 or 4 days? Kind of like, where are we now on Wednesday afternoon, and then roll on in.
Yeah, so we're like, the men's finals are set because they had both their bouldering and their lead rounds finished. So the top 8 are set. The women have only done their bouldering. They do their lead semifinal tomorrow, and then the top 8 will be set. And then the women's speed climbing is concluded. So we have winners there. And then the men's speed climbing final is tomorrow. So my predictions are, I guess, for speed climbing, it's really hard for me because I'm not that familiar with it, but also speed climbing it is one of those things where like anything can happen. Like, you have the 100-meter in track and field, and you kind of know like who's going to be strong and who's going to be fast. But speed climbing has this outlier factor of they actually slip a lot and they fall. And so that actually happens frequently during the events. And if you slip and fall, then you're basically done. So you can kind of never predict how that's going to happen. There are some pretty consistent athletes. The 18-year-old Sam Watson, I think, has a really good chance of winning the gold. So he would be the favorite for sure. And then
American, or where's
he's
Sam
American?
from?
Yep, he's the one from Texas, and he's pretty consistent as well from what I've seen. So if I had to bet, I would I would say it would go to him. And then I'm honestly not that familiar with the other athletes in speed, so I can't really speak to silver and bronze. And then for bouldering and lead, I have a lot of thoughts. The finals for the men are set, and it was pretty much what I kind of expected it to be. But at the same time, it's a field where you're kind of like, oh my God, it could go to any of them, realistically, depending on how they perform. There is the number one qualifier into the final is a Japanese teenager named Serato and Raku. And he's kind of like this prodigy. He's come on really, really strong in the last year or two, and he has been phenomenal throughout the event. And I think if I had to choose, I would say that he would take the gold. But then you have a couple veterans in the finals as well, like Jakob Schubert, who was the first qualifier to the Olympics. He won the World Championships last year. He has a tendency to like really perform when it counts. He's like one of those people that can just deliver under high pressure situations, and he has so much experience He won the bronze medal in Tokyo, and he's really, really good under pressure. So I would say I would pick him for a spot on the podium. I'm not sure what. And then you also have Adam Ondra, who kind of the same situation, really experienced, arguably the best climber overall in the world, and really, really wants to do well, really wants to win a medal. He's basically done everything that you could possibly do in rock climbing except win an Olympic medal. So it's definitely something that he's pursuing, and it seems like he wants really badly.
And is he kind of ancient in the
well, him and Jakob are in their 30s.
I get to say that because I'm ancient.
Yeah,
so.
They're in their 30s. There are actually quite a few men in their 30s in the event. I would say more people are in their 20s, obviously, or even younger. But yeah, there are definitely older. But I think it's cool that it shows that you can still perform at a really high level in rock climbing into your 30s because of that experience side, the cerebral side, the creativity side. I think it's pretty fun to watch like a 34-year-old competing against like a 17-year-old and pushing each other in that way. I think it's rad. So yeah, you have like the youth versus the veterans. And then you have people like Colin Duffy, who he's an American from Team ABC climbing out of Boulder, Colorado. They've produced 3 Olympians who are all at the Olympics now, 2 of which were also in Tokyo. And Colin, he's only 20 years old, but he was in the Olympics in Tokyo, so he has a lot of experience. He can also really deliver. He can also really perform well. He just won a World Cup in Chamonix a month ago. And so it's kind of one of those things where whoever has a really good day from the men could take it.
Wow, so that makes for a really exciting final, the men's. We're going to watch that one, huh?
Yeah, it'll be really exciting. And then the women's, like Janja Garnbret, the Slovenian superstar, I think it would be very, very surprising if she didn't win the gold medal. It's kind of like a Simone Biles situation. Like, she's pretty unbeatable. She's won everything. It's very rare that she doesn't win a competition. And she's definitely another level compared to the rest of the women in a lot of ways. And she's very consistent. She won the gold in Tokyo. And so, yeah, I think that's a pretty solid guess, is that she would win the gold. She performed really well in bouldering. She's the only one to top all 4 of the boulder problems. So yeah, I think that would be my choice. I don't know
how many years has Janja been dominant for, and do you see the field closing in on her, or is she just maintaining this space?
I haven't seen the field closing in on her at all. There is one exception to that, maybe. And I'll go into that in a second. But she's been dominant basically since she was 17 years old. So since like 2015, she's been kind of crushing it on the adult circuit and pretty unbeatable. It's like very surprising when she doesn't win, and it maybe happens like once a year or twice a year or something like that. There is a girl named from Japan, Ai Mori, and she is quite exceptional at lead climbing. And she's the only one who's been able to beat Janja basically more than once, but only in lead. Her bouldering is definitely a weakness of hers. So that's why I say, like, in this format, I think it's going to be really tough to beat her, because even if Ai Mori does really well on the lead route, her bouldering just doesn't compare to Janja's in any way. So I think Janja for gold. Silver and bronze are really up in the air. I think the 2 Americans, Natalia Grossman and Brooke Rabatu, have an excellent shot. They're both performing really well. Brooke won both the Olympic qualifier series just recently, was really dominant. And yeah, I think it could go to them. But there's also some other girls who are performing really well and incredibly strong. There's a girl from Austria, Jessie Pills. She's also kind of a veteran. She's been competing for a really long time, and she's really consistent. So again, it's just going to come down to who has the best rounds.
Wow. So it's funny, the women's lead in bouldering, it feels like, F1, Red Bull's going to win. So you
Yeah.
talk about second place. So in those interesting competitions that are happening in the midfield, kind of.
Yeah. And it's not like it's not like there's a path where like Yana could not win, but it would be rare. It would be surprising. So yeah, I think most people are kind of like talking about that silver bronze placement being a little bit more not super predictable.
Awesome. Well, we'll be excited to watch and see what ends up happening. Looks like Adrian's got a question before I wrap it up.
I know. I can see Sam. He's like, all right, let's get this done. Let's go watch some Olympics. No, I was just really interested in, obviously I have a little insight to your thoughts on this, but two-part question. How are the Olympics and climbing being in the Olympics? How have you seen that changing the sport? Obviously the people who listen to the Duffel Shuffle, while I'm sure I hope we have some comp climbers out there listening to the Duffel Shuffle. We speak to a lot of different forms of climbing, probably a little bit more outdoor focused audience. How is climbing in the Olympics changing the sport? How have you seen it change over decades? And I know just in the last few years, I've seen the U.S. comp climbing scene. It used to be a U.S. person placing well in World Cups like you did 20 years ago. I think you did really well in some World Cups, and it was really unusual. And now U.S. climbing is like one of the dominant teams in the world. So how is it changing in the U.S. for climbing? What positives and or negatives do you see as Olympic climbing and comp climbing grows into such a powerful force here?
Yeah, I think it's grown in popularity enormously, especially with the growth of climbing gyms. It's just so much more accessible to so many more people. And I think there's so much excitement around climbing being in the Olympics and seeing that. And it's created a lot more buzz and excitement around it. And I think it will create more climbers, more indoor climbers who might eventually go outdoors, but some of them might not. Some of them might just watch the Olympics and want to be gym climbers. And I also think that that's amazing. I think climbing is an incredible way to move your body, to gain confidence, to be social and build community. And so I'm just excited to see all of it. I think it's wonderful. I don't really see any downsides, honestly. Um, at this point, I I think it's just really really exciting to see. I've been super inspired by the Olympic climbers. I know some of them I don't know, but I think they're all really inspiring. They work super hard, and I wish them the best. And I'm just excited about all of it, and I'm super positive about it. I don't really see that many downsides, and I love to see it. And I also think some of the Olympic climbers are still they are or they're going to be great rock climbers, outdoor climbers. I think they're going to do some of the hardest things in the world in the future. I think it's really hard to be to do groundbreaking things outside in outdoor climbing without having a gym background, without having maybe even a competition background, because the gym is such a great way to train for the outdoors. And most people who are even doing really hard things up on LCAP have a gym background, they have a competition background. And I think that's just the beginning of what we're going to see outdoors. Once these Olympic climbers retire from competing, I think we're going to see amazing things outside.
So when you were climbing, competitively in sport climbing, did you have Olympic dreams, and did you ever wish that the climbing was added to the Olympics earlier on?
Yeah, all the time. I still wish that, like, I don't really wish that I was like 15 years younger and could do the Olympics, but I sort of do. And I did always want climbing to be in the Olympics, and I wish that it was my generation. Uh, but now I just get to watch.
Awesome. Well, sounds like you're having a lot of fun watching. Pretty cool
Yeah.
to kind of see how enthusiastic you are about the sport. Even though it's so different from what you do now, it's a lot of your past and how you got into the sport originally. So cool to see your passion. And you say you're a super fan, but you're definitely an expert.
Thank you. Well, I try. And I do love
Yeah,
it. I am so excited about it.
yeah. Thanks so much for sharing everything you did today. I mean, I'm so excited to see the next few days. I want to wish luck to all the competitors, but also now I'm so stressed for the route setters. So I want to wish luck to all the route
I
setters.
know it's so stressful, but I think they're doing good.
They're crushing. I'm sure they'll continue to crush. And I just wanted to add to what you said about, you can't really imagine a top level performing outdoor athlete who hasn't also, or outdoor climber who hasn't also really focused on gym climbing. Like, I think that is one of the most exciting things that we're seeing in our sport. And Sam, you and I have talked a lot about it in big mountain climbing and a lot of the faster things that are happening and in high altitude skiing. And I think it's so true in climbing as well, that as athletes with true professional coaching and nutrition and rest strategies, and starting when they're 2 or 3 or 5 years old instead of 15 or 20 years old, as those kids come into our sports that have been around for so long, the outdoor forms of them, like, I just am so excited for our sports and to see what's possible. I think we've barely scratched the surface. So it's really fun to hear you say that too. And these Olympians, they're the next generation.
Well, thanks for your time, Emily. We'll
Thank
be
you.
following along as the Olympics wrap up and looking forward to the LA Games in 2028. Thanks for listening to episode 9 of The Duffel Shuffle. This episode launched after the Olympic finals, but was recorded in the middle of competition. Big thanks to Emily Harrington for joining us to cover the Olympics. Emily is a wealth of knowledge, and you can follow her and all of her climbing adventures on Instagram at Emily Harrington. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another special interview. Thanks for listening.